think so. Obviously, we sat at the bar on the weekend, and one thing I was like, it's not the only sort of open kitchen I've been to, but I was thinking like, well, one, it's the kind of the silence of the service. There's no like, I know that's very old school and archaic in terms of like the, you know, having a strop kind of thing, but there was none of that. It was like marble smooth. How do you think, like, well, you specifically as well, like being able to see people being so close to, there's like no boundary between you and the kitchen. Like, how's that changed? Like, how do you think that's responsible for the success of this place? Because I think, or is it responsible for the success of this place?
I mean, it's definitely something that people enjoy. I think it's quite like raw here, to be honest, because the building is a bit fucked. I mean, it's a big old building that, you know, we do our best to maintain, but obviously comes with its own like inbuilt structural limitations. And that's like a really diplomatic way of like saying that there are definitely things that I'd like to be different. But I think that...
Such as?
Well, like the kitchen, for example, I mean, I designed the kitchen when I was 25, like kind of with my partners at the time. There was no like professional involvement in anything other than like deciding... No, I mean, apart from like the people that built the steel, for example, were like, the steel is like custom made, you know, from a fabricator. And it's, the only kind of difference with that is that it's a little bit higher because I'm quite tall, right? But but like the actual kitchen space itself was just so basic, so kind of rudimentary, because like I was 25, I had very limited experience, and what I wanted was to recreate the kitchen shape and equipment that I knew how to operate in from working in other jobs. So like the whole shape and all of it was like designed around how I knew to work at that point.
Interesting.
With like extremely limited experience. So, and then the openness of it, just to touch on that, because obviously that was the question, although we kind of pivoted.
Yeah.
But like, so I don't know if you know the like origin story, but basically with the Camberwell Arms, I was working at the Canton Arms in Stockwell. Yeah. And Charlie and Trish, who operate and own that pub, have two other partners who are called Jonathan and Rob. And Jonathan and Rob are part owners of the Canton. They're also part owners of the Anchor and Hope in Waterloo. And they used to be part owners of Great Queen Street, but now the Clarence Tavern up in Hackney, and also the Magdalen Arms in Oxford. But they kind of like they were the owner operators in the Anchor and Hope. Yeah. And then they have like a structure where they have like 4 partners and 2 of them are working partners in the new business. Do you see what I mean? So Rob and Jonathan like sit back on most of the businesses, and then anyway. So those guys were like my original partners, and I was working with them at the Canton Arms, and then we started looking for somewhere to. They wanted to go into business with me. Originally to do like a restaurant nearby the Canton Arms, which I kind of was less up for, but I really fancied doing a pub in the lines of where I'd worked, which was the Anchor and Hope and the Canton Arms, right? And that's what I knew. But Rob, at the time, when we started looking at this place, when we were like designing it, and I use that term so loosely because it was so basic, the approach to it. Like there was no professional designer, nothing. Budget-wise, there was nothing like that. It was just like, how do we want it to look? And we'll just aim for that and like get people to do those things. So in the most basic sense of like designing it. But Rob was like, because there's a kitchen up here, you know, and that was pre-existing. There was no kitchen downstairs. In fact, where the kitchen is now is where the old bar was. So Rob was like, the thing is, if you're going to be the landlord, because originally like I was going to be the working partner with Charlie from the Canton being like support, but like I was going to be the only kind of properly working partner.
So you would have been here cooking all the time.
Yeah. That's what I mean. Charlie did work here for maybe a year or something like that. But I think the idea was he was going to be more involved, and actually that didn't work out that well for me. So we kind of changed that eventually. But that's no disrespect to Charlie. I love Charlie.
Yeah.
But like, so Rob was like, yeah, but if you're going to be the landlord, you can't be upstairs in the kitchen, like invisible. And you know, I was listening to your podcast with Osh the other day, and he was talking about how he feels like it's important in a pub to feel the presence of the landlord. Yeah. And it's something that maybe is lost a little bit. And it's kind of interesting because like the idea of the pub landlord is quite arcane, but it is quite relatable in terms of, you know, an owner operator being present, right? Pub landlord is just another way of saying owner operator.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's why the kitchen was built downstairs.
So you'd be in the open...
Yeah, so I'd be in the restaurant and pub, yeah.
I love this. So like one of the common themes of this, people I speak to is like, I really believe your constraint is your like creativity comes from constraint.
Right.
And like you're like...
Yeah, necessity is the mother of invention and all
exactly,
that.
Yeah. So it's like, because it palpably punched me. I think what you said there, and I think that's the best way to describe it, and it was a word I couldn't, hang my vernacular on, was raw, when it was like, it was just, that was what I like the fact it's got just, it whacks you on the face with character as soon as you're in here. I can't really describe
well, I
that.
think like I'm not ashamed of the fact that it's a bit rough and ready.
I love it, yeah.
Right,
yeah.
And I think that like, I don't think people are that concerned about it. I mean, I feel like some people are, but they probably don't come to a place like this.
Yeah.
And actually, like, I think that the product speaks louder than that. So for me, that comes first. The quality of the offering, the service, the atmosphere, all of those things come above the like aesthetic. And the aesthetic's important, but it's kind of the sideshow really. To like, because it's like a vehicle for hospitality, right? And what you're experiencing is the warmth of hospitality and the generosity of an offering. And that's like a really authentic and genuine thing in the right place.
Yeah.
But it often isn't achieved because it comes secondary to financial goals or the design or whatever.
Somewhere about, and I loved it, like one thing you've talked about is like the real reason of hospitality. It's like, I think ultimately it's, make people happy. I've in lots of podcasts, stuff I've read about you, and you said there's this danger of the cult of the chef, is something where you said that was like the chef is the megalomaniac, like it's almost like you get so bamboozled by the stature of the as a consumer
because of that kind of line of thinking, I think, and it can be misconstrued. I feel like I'm a chef and I've been working as a chef for a very long time. I work less in the kitchen these days, but I'm still like, I bleed chef in that way, but I'm completely disinterested in the idea of like the restaurant scene, and in a way because it creates a homogenous culture that I don't often think is that good. So I feel like, especially because I think, if we're talking about like genuine hospitality and authenticity, right, that has to come from quite a personal place. For me anyway, that's how I operate. Like there's a bit of me in this business and I feel like you can feel it when you come here. And I feel like by the same token, when you go somewhere where you don't have that kind of genuine connection, you can feel it kind of fairly quickly because it's not cared for in the same way. And when I say cared for, I don't necessarily mean like it's the cleanest or it's the most organized or any of those things, which at times it is those things and at times it isn't. But what I mean is that there's a palpable personal connection with the offering, right?
Yeah.
So in terms of like the cult of the chef, I think there's a few things there, because I think part of that is also something to do with how I feel about working practices in kitchens and like the idea that there's a sort of badge of honor almost for working too hard at times, which is kind of dying out, thankfully. But something that I definitely suffered with and from and feel very differently about now. And I kind of feel like I feel like people need to be happy to make things nice. Chefs need to be happy, but also like,
well, this is what I'm trying to get to, because I walked in here on Saturday, and obviously you didn't know I was coming. That's and so I feel almost like this is like little breadcrumbs that have from a leadership perspective, I want to get into this, like breadcrumbs of Mike, if that's the right way of saying it, are sprinkled on the staff, because they were so warm and affable, and like nothing it was just very like light and like, punchy but light, if that's the right way of describing it. And there was a bit of a delay on our stars. There's a guy with long hair, I don't know what his name is. Look, smooth as fuck. Was like, okay, look, we'll take the.
What, working on the bar? Will? Yeah.
Yeah. I think he was like serving us, but he.
Okay. Maybe John. Yeah.
Yeah, he looked like a bit like Arctic Monkeys kind of vibe.
Okay.
Yeah, long hair. He'd probably hate me for saying
Was
that.
he Scouse?
I don't think he was Scouse. I mean, I'd had quite a few beers by the time
I got fine,
in. So,
all right.
But either way, he was like, look, the starters are off, they're off, that's fine. It's just like, it just felt really that. So I suppose, how do you, obviously you being literally at the stove in the open area is that whole thing of like the publican or the own operator has to be there to for that omnipresence to kind of spread. But how do you get your team to like, from a leadership perspective, to do that when you're not there? Do you know what I mean?
I mean, it's a continuous process rather than some kind of like singular magic bullet, I'd say. Sure. But like, I think that the first thing to say is that we have been open for 10 years. And like during that time, I was the head chef here in a very direct way for the first 5 years. Then I employed my first head chef and worked here. In fact, well, that kind of coincided with me having a breakdown and taking some time off work, and then kind of rebuilding my confidence to come back into the business. And then last year, Sam left, and he's gone to open the Waterman's Arms in Barnes.
I was there the other week.
Oh yeah, yes. I still haven't been. It's supposed to be incredible.
Good,
yeah. So, but
isn't he the guy who did Patty and Bun as well?
No, so the owner is Patty and Bun, but Sam is employed as the head chef there. But he's smashing it. He's a terrific chef. Yeah. But then he left at the end of last year, and then I had a sort of interim management period of myself being here, and then we got Mike, who's the new head chef, who started in January at the beginning of this year. But so like from a chef perspective, there's been not that much movement at the top. That's one thing to say. So from a like overall ethos and like attitude perspective, what's happened is that the offering has grown into itself, and it feels very comfortable now, partly because I am much more comfortable with what I want this place to be, and that comes with seniority and longevity more than anything else, because I was 25 when I started.
So young.
Which is young, and really I didn't know. The idea of what I wanted to do was just recreate where I had been working, because I didn't know any different, and I thought that was the best thing. And actually, you can't create something brilliant that way. You can create something good copying something else, but you can't create something authentic and singular and brilliant. And the way that you do that is by kind of being confident and comfortable with yourself. I think that like the best food that you will eat is food that's made to be eaten. So like I make food that I want to eat.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Which is like a kind of, maybe that's, I don't know how many, I suppose that's probably something that a lot of chefs would say. I don't know, maybe not. But I think that nothing for the sake of it in that way, food-wise, is the kind of baseline. Because the question is, how do you get the team as a whole to operate without you in a way that you want them to?
Yeah.
And so for me, as a chef, my focus is food, right? So the offering initially focused around food, but the food is part of the equation, but that's where I start. So my baseline is like nothing for the sake of it. Brilliant ingredients, like the best possible, as much possible made in-house, highly seasonal, all of these kinds of buzzwords that get thrown about all the time, like this is our credo, we live by this, right? Yeah. But that's the starting point, and then you build out from there. So because that's a very genuine position to take, when you start to radiate that philosophy, the other aspects of the business start to kind of pick up on that. Yeah. But it takes time, and also it's an active process. So like where that's a good starting point, it will only take you so far. And so I think that I'm very lucky at the moment to have one of the best teams we've ever had, like in the history of the Camberwell Arms. It's such a joy to come into work with everyone that works here, because it's just people love working here. That's and they're excited to be here,
Yeah, but hey guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Honestly means the absolute world to me. I'd be so grateful for a small favour, please. It is so hard growing a YouTube channel. It is so bloody hard. If you please enjoy these videos, just click the subscribe button. More subscribers equals bigger guests equals better conversations, and hopefully you can learn more as you build your food and drink brand. Thank you so much. It's like, I think it comes from what you were saying, is when you become kind of confident and calm in yourself, then your philosophy radiates. That's exactly what you said, and I think that's such a beautiful way of putting it. How would you say and another thing which is hugely honourable is to be in business for 10 years. Like, that's fucking insane.
Thanks, man.
And like, how would you say because I love the evolutionary point.
Yeah.
So I think people go into business obviously like baseline to stay in the game, one to do like super passionate things, but I think on an actual more deeper level is there's an evolution in yourself as your business grows, like in parallel. How would you say you've changed from like Mike 10 years ago in terms of getting that confidence, in terms of getting that ability to kind of just to get to where we are as an on Saturday, where it just is just moving like that? Do you know what I mean?
I mean, it's a long process, man, and because it's like that's like asking a person. you're asking it through the business prism, but the reality is that you're asking me how I've changed personally over 10 years. I mean, between 25 and 35, I think there's probably common experience in the sense that I felt like my 20s were just concentrated entirely on work. So, because I started Frank's when I was 20, right? Yeah. And then I started this when I was 25. That's really young. And I was proper like nose to the grindstone. Like when I started Frank's, I was working full time at the Anchor and Hope and Frank's. So I did like 45, 48 hours a week at the Anchor. They kindly grouped all my doubles together so I could do like Monday to Thursday doubles. And then I would do Friday, Saturday, Sunday at Frank's because we were only open Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So I literally worked 7 days a week, right? And I'm not advocating for that at all. In fact, quite the opposite. But at that time, I had no other strategy for getting through that part of my life. That was the only way I could approach it because I was like, if I'm actually going to like make anything happen here, I have to put myself into this fully without any thought towards my well-being or anything like that. It's crazy to think now, but I was sufficiently young and pliable to like get away with it a little bit. Like you can just about get by doing like 100-hour weeks and not sleeping that much, you know, at that age. Not that you should, but you can. When you're 30, when you're 30, you can't. Right? Yeah. So like in terms of how it's changed, I think my attitude to work has become less self-sacrificial. That's one thing. I feel totally confident as a person in who I am, where before I felt defined by my work. That's another thing that's changed.
I'm asking you all these things selfishly, right? So I've hit 30. Right. Same thing when I did this left comfort of peanut butter business. Right. When I was like, moved home with my parents, I was like, I'm going in. Like, I'm just going to fucking send it and make this thing a full-time thing. Now I hit 30 and not that... Yeah, because I think you talked somewhere about like anxiety hallucinations at some point in your... Like, I've definitely had experiences of that where it's like... And, you know, I'm still trying to sort of pinpoint what the fuck it is. Is it just working too much? I think when it's your passion, it become very muddled area because you're like, you love it so much but then you're like, mate, if you actually step back, you're working so much.
Yeah, but the point is that you're more than your work.
Exactly, yeah. Right, but I'm struggling to kind of... I think what you said there's two prisms to look through. The business and personal. Goes, you are defining yourself, your personal by your business prism.
Yeah.
I 100% relate to that.
Because it's actually not enough. I think that's the point, is that like a business is great and you can throw loads at it, but it's not life.
It may, 100%.
And that's it's a massively important distinction because the fact is there's this classic like aphorism, you know, like we work to live as opposed to living to work, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And the fact is, it can often, the balance there skews because quite often it can feel like you are just working, you're living to work. If you get trapped in that cycle of ambition where you're like, I need to give everything to this in order for it to go forward, there may be some truth in that, but I think it's not about the hours. It's actually more to do with how much you concentrate on it and how much you're able to focus on it. And I'm saying that from a position of someone who's like given everything to the point of burnout and now feels like it's not the only way to achieve the same end result. In fact, I would advocate for a different approach in order to create a better business.
So talk to me about the anxiety and like, let's go here, because I just think
100%.
I think like one, it's helping me, but I know it'll help loads of people who listen to this. But if you could describe almost like maybe a song that would describe like the way your brain was thinking, or like I think.
Well, this is the thing. So we could maybe cut this bit out, but because I think the easiest comparison is actually if you take psychedelics,
right?
But like because the experience of being trapped in a thought loop that you can't escape from is like terrifying and maddening, and that can happen if you have a bad experience with psychedelics. Yeah, but. I will try to think of a song, but yeah, I think
we can go with that. And I think so then you wake up, like what are the first in this period of time?
So but can I just give you some context first, because I think it's important, because I feel like otherwise we just drop into the apex of it, and actually there was a build up to it, and that's significant. Yeah. So I think that like So what we're talking about here is something that I've been open talking about, which is that I had a breakdown in 2020, right? Pre-COVID, and which is weird because I think a lot of people had a breakdown during or just at the beginning of COVID, and mine happened separately to it, really. It was completely irrespective of that. And then COVID happened and it kind of compounded it in some ways, but also made it easier because the business changed and I wasn't dealing with that. But also, if I'd been here, I don't know how I would have dealt with it, right? Yeah. So, but in 2019, I lost 80% of my chefs at the beginning of the year. Coincidentally, like a group of people who had been here for a long time all kind of handed in their notice with different lengths of time. And the only solution at that point was for me to come back into the fold. And I had been trying to step away from it unsuccessfully to give myself a little bit more breathing room. And what that actually looked like was just working every day, doubles, but like I said to you before, it's not quite as easy to do that when you're 30 or over 30. Like, your body, for one, isn't the same, and your mind certainly isn't the same. And I started to kind of like degrade mentally at that point. Then I managed to hire an amazing head chef called Sam and a sous chef called Ben, who are both lovely people, and they kind of took it on. And what it feels like in my head is that the relief of having these guys who are able to do the job that I had wanted to give up for quite a while was so palpable that my brain sort of imploded. And what happened was, very gradually towards the end of the year, I started to get physically unwell. Various other, like, for example, I've got gout, which is like a sort of comedic thing for a lot of people, but like I had, that's partly to do with family history and partly to do with like a life of excess, right? But also, it's to do with the stress building up in my body, like triggering something that shouldn't really have happened to me for another like 10 or 20 years, right? And then I had a long-standing like sickness, like a sort of flu-style thing that I literally couldn't shake for like 8 or 9 weeks, like regularly spiking with fever. And I was working at this point, like doing shifts in the kitchen, trying to support the team. So it was all kind of building. And this is after so 2019... what's that, 5 years ago? So yes, we're talking about 12 years into the industry at this point. The pub is 5 and kind of doing okay, but like not out of the woods yet. And it just all kind of built after that long of being an owner operator, a head chef and a director. It was just too much and my brain couldn't take it. And what happened was that like over the Christmas period, my anxiety started to build about opening Frank's the following year. And I had in my mind, I had created a new system of operating for Frank's that I wanted to launch the following year because I was like, this is going to revolutionize the way we do it, blah, blah, blah. And what happened was that I started, basically at the beginning of January, I started having stress dreams in the daytime, which I've described as anxiety hallucinations, if you like. But the reason for that is that that's how it felt to me at the time. I was awake. It was during the day, and I was trapped in a visual loop of doing mise en place out of that kitchen here with a chef from Frank's who I was going to hire, and we were just looping over these processes, and I was like, but this is wrong, like this isn't the way to do it. It's like when you have a stressful dream that you can't get out of, right? But it was completely terrifying because I thought that I was going mad. I literally thought that I wouldn't be able to communicate with a human again. So I just, in my mind, I was like becoming a lunatic. Yeah, that's how I felt. I thought that I was going insane. And that is terrifying. You can see it now. You can feel it coming off me, right? There's a very real sense of fear at that point that I'm lost forever. And so it was very intense, but remediable over time. And it did take time, but like there was a point where I did try to go into work after the break, and Vicky, who's our ops director, and a great support to me over the years, and friend also, it's that classic thing of just like, she just asked me if I was okay. And I was like, no. And I started trying to explain it to her, and she was like, Mike, you have to go home, like, now. And so I did do that. I went home, and then it got worse a little bit. And my wife, Benita, was like, there was a point where like I couldn't talk or it's hard to describe. I'm going to tell you though, what it looked like, I guess, was just me sort of like hysterically crying, covering my face and like sat in a corner.
That's what it
physically looked like.
Yeah,
yes.
physically looked like.
So she was like, fuck,
yes.
what am I going to do about this?
Yeah.
Like he can't even fucking go outside. Like, what the fuck are we doing?
Yeah.
And so she called my parents. Is this too much? Are we all right?
No, yeah.
So my parents came round and they were like, the three of them worked to like stop me from going to work. And so what we did was we managed a conversation at that point about like the main concerns that I was having, which were to do with various things that just, it seems so insanely ridiculous now that I was really fixated on.
Yeah, but so I've got obsessive, like I've got a seriously addictive personality.
Right, okay.
So I can ruminate on something like this. Is not a big thing at all, but I'll ruminate on it for like, to the point it is a bit sort of, maybe not to the same degree or same texture as what you had, but I've definitely had those, my life is sadly like punctuated with occasionally these big blotches of fucking anxiety, and I'm just like...
Sorry to hear that, man.
Yeah, but it is. It's just like, it is what it is.
Yeah.
I think if you've got a brain that's sharp, like they're like not sharp, but like always thinking, it's just comes with the MO, mate, unfortunately. But yeah, what you're describing there, one thing I wanted to ask you is when you've got that addictive, or like not necessarily addictive, but like when you're like, I have to be at work, otherwise my ship's gonna sink. So you've got that on one side.
Which, by the way, isn't true ever. I know, but it's important to say it. Yes, absolutely.
So with this, I can't take time off.
No.
I feel sick if I take time off, which I'm asking this, but it's like I need to.
Yeah.
And also, what the thing that you said there is like I could be on a beach in Barbados,
right?
But my brain is still worrying about this. You could put me in and that's one thing I'm trying to work through is like how you...
So, but that's where I was, but I've let go of that.
So how? Like this,
well, so one of the ways is having a breakdown.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Which I wouldn't recommend, but like certainly is a way to rewire yourself because it forces you to make a change. So I basically reached a point where so after that, when I was off work, that was where there was a period of appraisal for myself about whether I wanted to be alive or not. Right? Like for me, that's the narrative internally. It's like, do I actually want to live, right? Yeah. So I'm talking about being suicidal, but what I'm talking about is like trying to imagine whether or not my life has value and so on and so on. And that kind of like depth of sadness and depression and anxiety that had built up to that level, that's kind of where I was with it, right? But the thing is that if you feel like that, then you are close to doing something that is permanent, that is unchangeable. Yeah. And so through a process of taking time off work and complete detachment from it, and medication, and therapy, and some investigative psychedelic experiences, which I'm not talking about like recreational drug use there. I'm talking about like seeking out something other, right? The combination of those things and time allowed me to consider the fact that I actually did want to be alive. Yeah. And like I wanted to live because I like life. I like being alive. And it's like, it's that fundamental at that point, because it's like, what are we doing here? Are we just going to work ourselves into an early grave so there's nothing left to enjoy? Or are we going to actually realize that life is more than work? Mm. And so that time, and then, I mean, there's more to it, but that's basically, I think that's my experience. I can't tell you how to remedy it, but what I can do is say to you that if you feel like that now, you need to be careful about the way that you're working because it doesn't result well, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think you can. I think what you've said there is right at the beginning is the two prisms. Yeah. Your personal prism versus your business prism, and I think so many of us, we derive sort of status, identity, and this is why it gets kind of confusing, connection through our work. Like with all the neoliberalism shit in the 80s, where people were like making money on Wall Street, Margaret Thatcher, all that, you start defining yourself by your work. Like it wasn't always like that, And now it's getting, especially with social media, is we're defining ourselves by literally adding up what our worth is via a number of fucking followers, which I think's like on a macro level is fucked. Then so you're in that sort of dark period. How did you I think you said you were in search for others. I think what you said, not necessarily. What were those other things that you'd did to kind of detach the two prisms, the business and the like?
Well, so it's interesting because I think that like for me internally, there's like an inherent crossover between like hospitality and who I am as a person. And this is not just a soundbite. This is just like, as a person, I actually love looking after people. Not love, it's like built into me. It's like how I like to, I care for people in a way that like, I don't know, that's just part of who I am, right? So like hospitality is a kind of natural arena for that, but it's also really difficult because it's something that's so deeply personal to me. So like the two things are like intrinsically linked. So it's quite difficult to unmesh something like that. And actually I don't think I did unmesh it, but what I did was I thought a lot about if I like my job at all, and then I was like, but if I like it, why do I like it? And the conclusion I came up with was that I like it because on a very simple level, I quite like making people happy with food specifically. But more than that, I like the idea of being hospitable and like welcoming someone into your house and giving them a good time. That to me is like, I like feel that in my core as something that I want to do and enjoy. And that's, so then it's like, okay, well that makes sense then. It's like, that's why I do my job, because that's an amazing thing to want to do. That's like a beautiful goal. And like beyond money or time or anything like that, that's actually like really wholesome and like really sustainable and kind of benign, you know? And so like that kind of moment was quite a big moment for me, because I was like, okay, well that's like, I can get into that. Because like before that, it was like, I hate my job. It's killing me. And it's like, because I've lost sight of all of that, because instead I have ambition and work only, this drive, this overriding drive to like achieve something, I don't know what, but like a limitless goal of just like never good enough kind of achievement. And actually like at that point it changes, because it's like, well, if I really just want to do that, then I know how to do that. Yeah. Because I'm a professional at that. Yeah. And I can just be, on a very basic level, I can reconnect with the things that actually allow me to do that. In fact, and I'm sorry to just put this in here, but like that's one of the reasons for writing my book is actually to do with this. If you're happy for me to...
Let's talk about it,
Just because, so...
It's called Cooking for People.
So the book's called Cooking for People. Yeah. I'm going to say that it's out in August on the 15th, just in case.
Get us to go live on that day, mate.
And, you know, you can pre-order it and so on and so on. But, like, the fact is that the book, two things. The first thing is that the book, for me, represented an opportunity to use my skill set in a different way to opening or running businesses, which I don't know if you're aware of, but it's fucking stressful. And like, it felt to me like writing a book might be slightly less stressful way of using my skill set. I think that is partially true, but it comes with its own stresses. But more than that, when I was thinking about the idea for the book, the idea of like dinner parties and entertaining at home, it felt to me like there is quite like a lot of stress associated with like hosting people in your house, in your own personal space. And so there's this idea, the idea for the book is just that you can use how I organize myself as a chef to help you to like not feel that stressed about cooking a 3-course meal for, you know, any number of guests in your house, and like trying to get to the point where you can actually enjoy it. So this thing of like, on a fundamental level for me, post-breakdown, reconnecting with the like deep philosophy of hospitality is something that I've tried to like imbue the book with a little bit. You know, the idea that actually like it's not that fun to fucking like stress about cooking loads of different dishes from loads of different cookbooks and go to the shops multiple times, and then by the time you get to the end of the fucking week and you like got people coming around, do you even fucking want them to be there anymore? You know, are you gonna actually enjoy yourself? You're just gonna be cooking the whole time. It's like, that's bullshit.
Yeah, I love that. I love the fact that you've rediscovered your kind of inner burning fire or drive, and realizing that it got kind of pulled into this myopic like burnout, work, and then now like channeling that skill set into cooking for people. I listened to a podcast with a video with Trevor. His name's, you know, from St. John.
Right.
Second name escaped me, but he was
Gulliver.
saying, Gulliver, that's it. He was saying your appetite is your is your happiness.
Yeah.
And obviously, I'm not going to go all fucking pharmaceutical here, but on the gut, everyone's wanking over their gut health at the minute. Yeah, like there's definitely a link to your positivity. Then I was thinking that's so true, and they were saying like I think one of the ways we're kind of passing on a deep level, like passing happiness, is through like cooking for people or doing something for people. And one of the things I was thinking, I was like, well, it's mad, like, and I was listening to you. You talk about your kind of hallucinations, and then I was thinking there is definitely a theme with poor mental health in chefs, and providing lots of amazing warm hospitality for people. Obviously, who was the guy? Was it Norman who's just passed away last year?
Norman,
Obviously Bourdain. He's my biggest fucking hero in the world. But there's a common theme, and I think it's like there's maybe like trying to solve for happy, or there's like some happiness equation going on. And I think the food is the vehicle to kind of pass it on to someone and then get it back, reciprocate it back. And I think it's something I've been thinking about a lot recently in terms of. Why would someone as a chef go and put those hours in, work their tits off, and I think there is something in that. Let's talk about like what is in your opinion from the book, like what is the art of like a glorious, let's talk about the happy side now, a glorious dinner party or cooking for people, like what's the everything you've learned from doing the book, like what's...
Well, so like I think that for me it is just about like being happy whilst it's going on if you're the host, right? So like I think the point is that like I'd say being organised in a small way and a very basic way is the key to success with cooking. Like on a professional level, it's the same thing. Like I don't go into a Friday night service with nothing prepared. If I'm going to get really busy, I need to have mise en place. I need to have prep done, right? And in the same way, you can totally approach things at home like that without being really chefy about it. So I think that like it's quite complex a dinner party because like inviting people into your home is intrinsically slightly fraught. Because like, although like obviously they could be your friends or whatever, it might also be like your parents-in-law, or it might be some people that you feel like you need to have around for whatever reason. And for a lot of people, like, I think people think about dinner parties in different ways. Like some people want to impress people, some people just want to have a nice time and are chill about it, and so on and so on. So there's loads of different approaches. I think overall, what makes something good is if the host is relaxed, right? Because the host is where everything is coming from, or the host people. Yeah.
It's the same philosophy you've got with the kitchen.
Exactly that.
Like I radiate I radiate here. When you became more yourself, you connected with yourself, it radiates through here. So same thing at home.
Yeah.
Right?
So let me put it a different way, which is something that we use in the Camberwell Arms quite a lot in terms of management. It's like if you can't look after yourself, how can you look after someone else? And we're talking about hospitality here. So when we talk about looking after, that's what I'm talking about. So if you're not okay, no one else is going to be okay. Your food's not going to be okay. The people aren't going to have a good time. And so if you're like, I'm assuming that you haven't got like, everyone's got other shit going on all the time, right? I'm not really talking about that. We're just talking at a basic level about a dinner party. So if you're cooking a dinner party, like first of all, having a menu that you're confident with, which is something that I've tried to help with, right? So because I love writing menus and I feel like I'm good at it. So like I've written a book of amazing menus that people can actually feel are kind of curated for them. So they don't have to like build something to...
Okay, sure, with you. Yeah. So you'll do like the
so everything's 3 courses. So okay, it's like, sick. It's all, yeah, right. So it's like, it's all pre-built in that way. And then there's like the kind of uniqueness of it is that there's like a literal like a shopping list, like I would write an ordering list. So it tells you like for all of the recipes together, what you need in total of all of the ingredients. So you can just go out and get everything all at once to make that menu. And then there's like a prep list, so you can see how far in advance certain things can be made. If you do make them in advance, how you store them, and like so on and so on. So it's just like taking this thing out of it.
Northstar, get listed, say listed, and grow. Do you actually know your shopper? If you don't know your shopper, you're literally pissing and spunking money up the wall. Knowing your shopper is the secret weapon to unlock more grocery listings and more stores. But not knowing your shopper is literally like driving in the dark, hungover, without a sat-nav, in a thunderstorm, in February with 5 miles of petrol in the tank. But knowing your shopper is like having a sat-nav. A full tank of petrol is a glorious sunny day. You're listening to the Sugar Babes and you've got a fresh, hot, pumpkin spice latte by your side. Northstar Illuminator is the shopper map to the promised land of growth and success. It does 3 wonderful things for your brand. 1, make your marketing budget sweat. When you've got lucid, crystal clarity on exactly where each precious penny is going, you know how to drive loyalty with existing customers or even bring new shoppers into your brand. Número dos, what's actually driving performance? Do you actually know why your sales are going up and down? You need to know, like, are you bringing new shoppers into the category? Is that driving growth? Are loyal customers buying more of your brand? Are shoppers switching in and out of your brand versus other brands? I mean, Perfect Head's a glorious example. They are bringing new shoppers into sports and energy. They are so incremental versus, say, chocolate bars, where people just switch in and out of brands all the time. The more you know this, the more oomph you've got with your buyer when you go to do a marketing plan, a joint business plan with retailers. The buyers want to know how incremental you are to the category. That is your passport to success. Northstar is your passport. And what you can do is you can literally see it by channel, by retailer, get so specific. If you're looking to go to the next level, honestly, get in touch with Northstar and go to the promised land.
Delighted to announce the extension of our partnership with the wonderful Billy and Paul from McKenzie Jones, but even more exciting, they have just launched a brand new brand as part of McKenzie Jones called MKJ Ignite. MKJ Ignite is a recruitment firm which specializes full shebang focus entirely on challenge brand space. They work with some incredible brands: Lucky Saint, Goodrays, Purdy and Fig, Hunter and Gather, and Real Superfoods. They can support with your hiring needs across all levels, top to bottom, junior entry-level jobs, all the way through up to MD and CEO level. So if you're looking for a field sales stomper, a sales wizard, an ops guru, a supply chain sensei, you name it, MKJ Ignite can help you out. And look, if you're looking to wet your whistle, ignite your curiosity, then check out the poddy we recorded with them back in July. Laden with wisdom, all about like do's and don'ts of hiring and like how to create the perfect job description. You will love it.
No, I love that, and I think the two philosophies link over.
Yeah, 100%.
It's the same philosophy, yeah.
And that's exactly it. Yeah.
The what would you say? What kind of menu in that book are you kind of most proud of? I know there's a gazillion in there, right? But like, what's the one that kind of would really kind of epitomise everything we've been talking about this morning?
So
and why?
Right. So I think the one is actually the one I put in my original proposal, right, which is a menu from the autumn season, and it's kind of late autumn in a way because it still features tomatoes, but I think a lot of summer produce is almost at its best in the zenith of the season because you're getting to the point where they've had like a full summer of sun, and then now like tomatoes and peaches are kind of like at their absolute fullest and ripest in September, right?
Sure.
And so the menu is a tomato salad. And then the main course is beef shin, braised like ossobuco, with saffron puntelletti. Puntelletti is like orzo, so it's like a rice-shaped pasta. And the dessert is peaches with zabaione and flaked almonds. So it's like baked peaches with a kind of... zabaione is like a sort of whipped Italian custard. And yeah, so it's so good, man. It's just ridiculously delicious. Those things are so nice, and like they're very simple. I mean, so the idea there, if you're gonna follow through with the kind of like happy
full
chef,
shebang.
right?
Yeah.
Now, a tomato salad, obviously, you're gonna make a tomato salad last minute, but it's super easy to do. And there's something that I like to do, which is just macerating red onions in the base of the salad. It's not a new thing, but the fact is it's kind of creating a dressing. So that's part of the recipe, but it's very, very basic. And partly it's because you're going to have quite an intense main course. So I just thought it was nice to have a bit of levity. And then with your main course, with something like beef shin like that, obviously it's like a slow cooked piece of meat. It's got very tolerant, lots of sinew and cartilage in there that's kind of broken down slowly. So it's got this kind of amazing unctuous texture that it can hold for quite a while. You will have cooked it.
I'm fucking hungry, mate.
This is what I mean. But you could have cooked it, 3-4 days before and left it in the fridge, and it's just going to be absorbing slowly its surroundings, and you can warm it up, later on. And the pasta equally that comes with it, in a restaurant we would blanch the pasta ahead of service, so the dry pasta would already be cooked, and we'd be finishing it in sauce to order, which is what I've suggested in the book. So you're taking some stock from your beef braise, some cream, some saffron, cheese and butter, and you're just basically heating up the pasta in those things. So we're talking about like a 2-3 minute process, or 5 minute process maybe at home, right? So your tomato salad is going to take you all of 10 to 15 minutes to prepare, even if you're going slowly, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe slightly longer if you have spent the morning prepping some onions, but you know, your beef shin is already done. The pasta's blanched. The sauce is already made in the beef shin, right? There's a gremolata that goes with it, which is chopped parsley and orange zest and garlic. Anyone can manage that. We're talking about a very short lead time. The peaches and zabalioni. Peaches are cooked ahead. Zabalioni can be made in the day and hold. And so it's an assembly job, essentially. So what you've done is you've removed all the variables so that by the time you get to actually perform or put the food out, you don't have to worry.
Yeah, I just love how like the link of this all kind of links, the book links.
I'm so pleased that you've actually understood that, because it's something that I've struggled to communicate, and obviously it's like a USP for the book. But like you're right. That's exactly the point. It does link.
Yeah, the links are almost like the breakdown of like this is no way to kind of be, to live. It's like, well, actually, and I think in this process, I think you have to hit rock bottom to come back up. But like you rediscovered, and what you said, or kind of your soul was, the reason I do this is because I want to make people feel happy with food. You discover it, and then it's like that energy's going into this cooking for people book, and it's like, and I really believe, the more I always think about these ideas live most of the time, but I really believe there's like when there's a plate of food going from one person to another, it's like teleporting fucking happiness, in my opinion. On like the most
it's an act of love.
Yeah, for sure. How did you, let's go, because you went to, I want to talk about, well, we'll touch on your old mum was an immunologist.
My dad, yeah.
Yeah. And you went to go and do biology.
I did.
Yeah.
Like,
so you've got that background, and we'll talk about your old man. And so then I've read somewhere, he's like, seemed like a very interesting character. Yeah. Really super interesting guy. And, but like, so yeah, you went to uni, you were doing was it biology? Yeah. Like what, in that formative period, how, we've talked about like, rediscovering your I hate the word why, it's so wanky, but it is kind of what it is. Rediscovering it at say 35, 36, when you're like at uni, like where how was it beginning to gestate that why of like, I want this is what I want to do, I don't fuck biology, do you know what I mean?
Well, so I think maybe I'll just tell you the true story.
You tell me the true story.
Like, only because it's not so glamorous. And I think that like, I went to quite a good school. I'm not particularly academic, but I've got a very powerfully strong memory. Like, so I can, if I want to, I can remember something really clearly and I can regurgitate it. So it means that I can get by in an academic setting, generally speaking, by just doing that. But I don't always apply myself, and didn't always apply myself during my educational period.
Sure.
Right? And uni was no exception. I think I wanted to study biology because of my dad, which is weird because he had never made any kind of, there was no push towards that at all.
Just context for listeners, what your dad, because I read somewhere that like the COVID vaccine and stuff, there's linked back to
the science that was used in the COVID vaccine is partially, because during the 60s, his laboratory, he worked for the Institute of Cancer Research for like 40 years. Sure. And he had a laboratory there, which during the 60s was responsible for the discovery of T cells, a type of white blood cell. There are other scientists working on the same thing at a similar time, but like that lab is responsible for like a significant proportion of the research and discovery of T cells. T cells are a type of white blood cell. I mean, they're like a fundamental part of humanity, right? And the way that we function as humans, particularly in the immune response, basically, which we don't necessarily need to get into. But like, yes, he was in that way. I was going to say he was a big deal, but like it's so funny because he was so not a big deal. Like it's because he wasn't like a money guy. He was a full science guy. He was like obsessed in a brilliant way with like science and biology and humanity. And so he's a very special guy, really special guy. We unfortunately passed away in 22.
I'm so sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
But you see, from the research I did, it seems like he had like a massive impact on everything you've done, and we'll talk about that. So you're at uni, you've got photographic memory, basically.
Well, kind of, yeah.
And then what's going on to like, where's the food thing beginning to bubble?
So like the food thing comes before that. The food thing is because my mum is an amazing cook and her mum was an amazing cook. And I grew up in a house where like my mum made everything from scratch, more or less. And so generally speaking, we ate like delicious fresh food all the time, right? Which was, I was so lucky to have that. But didn't do that much cooking because she did all the cooking, and I did a lot of eating, right?
Yeah, my mum's the same.
Right.
Yeah.
So like I got very good at eating and enjoying food, but like, which is a weird thing to say, but I do think that not everyone enjoys eating and food in that way. Like a lot of people eat for functionality rather than pleasure, but not me. But yeah, and we would also go to restaurants and stuff like that, and like if there were special occasions, we would go and eat in nice places, and that was kind of part of what we did. And I'm very privileged to have had that kind of upbringing. I make no bones about that, but like it was an important and influential thing. Equally, like watching cookery shows like Jamie Oliver, people like that, even Delia. That was something I really enjoyed, and like Jamie, I think, started to make me think like, oh, maybe I could do that, right? But then, so I went to uni, and spent a lot of time not working, like spent a lot of time enjoying myself, smoking quite a lot of weed as well at that time, which for me at that anyway was probably like not that helpful. It's probably the best way to put it.
Yeah, when I smoked it for a bit of uni, and I think that's maybe fucking pathological. Like you've got like your tendencies to be anxious, like for me that just didn't work at all.
No, but also like it slowed me down a lot,
yeah,
you know, and made me disinterested in at that moment. And I'm not there's no shade there at all. It's just that I'm the last person to like criticize someone for doing something like that, but I think that at that time it wasn't good for me. But anyway, basically I was asked to write an essay about stem cells by my tutor, and I didn't write it. And then I got to the like day before, and I was like, right, I'm just gonna copy something from the internet, and just literally didn't even go down the Google search, just like Wikipedia, fucking like copied loads of shit out, wrote an introduction, and that was it, right? And I was so ashamed to be called in when they caught me out, because I was thinking like there's no way they give a shit about some fucking idiot first year like plagiarizing something. But of course they did, you know, because the fact is that like that is the antithesis of learning. Like you're completely undermining the process. Like what are you even doing? And of course I wasn't thinking about that because I didn't really give a shit about learning about biology at that point. I just wasn't engaged with it. It wasn't for me. And so I got caught out, and I was like, fuck, it was a real moment for me where I was like, I felt really ashamed, and I knew that I could do better. In fact, I did then rewrite the essay, and it was great, right? But I feel like at that moment, I kind of like thought the shock was sufficient to make me question whether or not university was something that I actually wanted to do. And I had this kind of dark moment where I went home and thought my parents would be very disappointed with me for thinking that. And actually, they just totally weren't. They were just like, and it was really weird because I was so upset and they were really worried about me. But then when we actually got to the point where it was like, I don't know if I want to be at university, they were like, that's fine. Like, that's okay. And I don't think all parents would have been like that, but they certainly were.
Yeah, because I went to Manchester, you went to Manchester, I went to Manchester as well. Like, I dropped out of Bournemouth uni, long story, but partying, and then for some reason decided to reapply and went to Manchester, which was even crazier. But like, yeah, I know that feeling of when I was just like sat in Bournemouth uni, and it was a good job I went to Manchester in the end, because it's like there was just one module that made the whole thing worth it, but the rest of it was long. But that feeling of actually, if you're like having sound parents who are like open is just such a fucking unfair advantage.
They were so supportive, and then but then we started to talk about options, and I was like, I think maybe I want to try and be a chef. And my mum was kind of like, yeah, that makes sense to me that you would want that. And then but I had already signed a contract for a student house, right? So I was like, well, I'm going to just go back to Manchester. The idea originally was to go to catering college. I missed the enrollment date, so I couldn't get on a course. Thank fuck I didn't do that. I'm really happy I didn't do that. And then basically went back up to Manchester actually before that, I had been working in a fish and chip shop in Norbiton, which is like in southwest London. That's like next to a fishmonger.
Kingston.
Yeah.
I'm out. Sorry.
Oh right. So I had been working there as a waiter, and then basically like that summer.
Is that posh fish and chip shop?
Yeah, fish. You know, there's one in Borough Market as well.
Yes. Yeah, right. I know. Yeah. It's on the corner.
Yeah.
It's fucking good.
It's good. Yeah. No, it's really good, and it's next to that fishmonger, and the guy who bought the fishmonger as well. So it's kind of nice.
Yes. Yeah, I know exactly where it is. Yeah.
So I used to work there as a waiter when I was like 16, right? And then at that point, I basically stopped going to university, right? That was in the Easter holidays, and I was like, right, I need to take a break from this. So I left, went back to London, and then the manager was like, and I just started working to get some money. The manager was like, the head chef and the sous chef are going away. We need a chef, and you're the only other person on the team that has English as their first language, so you can help me with the ordering. Do you want to do it? And I was like, yeah, cool. And like, so then I just kind of like helped him to like run the place from a food perspective. I mean, he was a manager and I was the head chef, but I was just covering for someone for like a couple of months during the summer. And then, I was like, okay, this is good. I like this. And it was hard graft, but like we didn't really do any prep there. It was kind of just all about service because it was fucking busy. Like it was a tiny restaurant, but like it was near a train station. So you have two chefs working, one on the fryer and one on the grill and till. And if you're doing the grill and till, you're also doing takeaway orders. So you're like talking to people whilst you're cooking. You can have all of the fish either fried or grilled. So you're like wrapping takeaway orders, using the till, turning around, grilling fish. It's like hectic, man. It was, it was so fun. Yeah. And I think about it now and I'm like, that really helped me with like not worrying about being busy at all. When I then later went into work in like busy places, that was where I excelled. I was actually really shit at cooking, but like I was like, in terms of doing service, I was like, yeah, this is fine.
Yes. How would you say, and this is a random question, so with your dad's kind of science background and your photographic memory, like...
I mean, you're saying that, I'm not saying that.
Sorry, I'm saying that, yeah. That's a big caveat.
Yeah.
Like, but you've got this memory that can, well, like could regurgitate things in exams, and you're saying to get into a good school, like it was important. Like, would you say, is there like... I've asked this to a few people, like, I asked this to Paul Ainsworth, I said, is the food art, magic, or science? And I've had various responses. Like, what would you say, it is to you? Is it an art, is it magic, is it science? Like, So
I don't think food is magic, but I think how people react to food is magic. That's the first thing I'd say about magic.
Interesting.
So I think that actually making food is it is a combination of art and science, because in a literal sense, it is scientific. Like, I need to heat something to X degree in order for it to be cooked. And that's just in the way that we define it on a semantic level. We're talking about like the limitations of vocabulary here, right? So we have the words that we have to describe the processes that we have, right? And part of that is, I need to, like I said, there are specific critical temperatures, or there are like combination of ingredients that's going to yield this result and so on, right? And that's not like alchemical, that's scientific. It's not mysterious, it's pretty finite, right? I mean, at this level anyway. I mean, there are obviously dudes that are like off in the clouds doing their molecular shit, which just has no, I mean, fair enough, but that's not where we are here. But so that part of it is scientific, but the creativity, much like if you're curating an art space, is the rest of the process of like choosing the menu, working with ingredients, building up your knowledge as an artist, perhaps understands building materials or colors. So if you're thinking about like an artist palette of colors to paint with, right? That's what I'm doing when I think about ingredients and work with suppliers and think about menus. I'm like thinking about I'm using knowledge, right, and parts of a scientific understanding to curate an artistic experience or a creative experience, right? So there is a crossover between all of those things.
Sure.
The magic is like the response to hospitality, because that's where like something happens that isn't that tangible. And that's what, so I have a small non sequitur about my dad. My dad was a pure scientist, right? But we recently had a baby girl. She's 13 months old.
Amazing.
Like when, I'm just trying to think, well, my wife actually got pregnant just after he died, but like I had a conversation with him a few years ago about a friend of mine getting pregnant, and he was like, the thing is, being pregnant is magic, making a baby is actual magic. So this is from like the hardline scientist, and what he means by that is that there's obviously like it's explainable. Like we could walk through the like cell replication, and we could walk through reproduction on a cellular level, and we could talk a lot about that. But ultimately, what it is growing a human inside another human, right?
It's fucking mental.
It's completely bananas.
Yeah.
And so like for him, Mr. Science, to be like, oh, it's magic, and so for me, like when I think about what magic is, I always think about that story, but also because there are things that are like intransient, there are things that are like beyond explanation.
Yeah. I know, and that's what I was trying to get to, is like applying the science background of your dad with like what?
Yeah.
Because I thought they were actually different. They were kind of opposing. A lot of people think art and science are kind of opposing, but I think there is a cross link between the two.
Yeah.
And what your old man said about having a baby like is the most technically scientific thing in the world, but it's still magic. Do you know what I mean? I think what you're saying, applying this to the Camberwell Arms and food, is it's like the cooking is the science. It's like you heat, you cook something to this degree, it's going to get the repeatable result, hopefully, hopefully. But then the magic is the reaction for each person. So like when I was here on Saturday, 15 people, or maybe probably more than that, like 50 people could all have the same either pork neck, delicious, and my mate had the skate. There was loads of those dishes going out, right? But each and every person, because of all unique experiences, was experiencing a different kind of magic.
Right.
And I think that's really interesting.
Yeah.
It's like, I interviewed Tom Straker, and he was saying to me that you can get every like, so we just line up 15, 20 chefs, give them all the same ingredients, like, because each chef has a very unique, different experience of the world, they're going to create something different if they can put their authentic mark on it. And I think that's the same with the reaction of people when they're having restaurants. It's like, eating at restaurants is. I came in after a couple of pints. Someone who may have come in with kids, so their version of magic is so unique, and I think that's what makes it so interesting. What's the So you talked a lot about kind of, I think you worked at St. John, Rochelle Canteen.
So I did stages at St. John. Yes, and Rochelle Canteen, I did work there, but very briefly. But yeah.
Right. Okay. Then Anchor and Hope Canteen.
Yeah, those are like the bulk of it. Yeah.
So then, how did you get all those ideas, and then begin to find your unique? We've talked about like why you're doing it in terms of that authentic why, but then you need an authentic kind of. This is the way we do things at the Camberwell Arms, and like this has been going for 10 years now.
Right.
There is a unique way of doing things.
But I've grown into that though, but yes.
Sure. But how did you initially begin to find it? Because I think lots of people, I really believe originality is what you're doing is, I say this quote all the time, David Bowie's got a quote that says, who's the most original fucker around? David Bowie, right? The only art I'll ever study is the art I can steal from. And what he means by that is he listens to get in the muse, and then when you combine it to your own unique thing, then you have something unique. How did you get that?
Well, I guess that's interesting. Yeah, because he's kind of talking about like building up, but he's like, you need some reference, some context, and you need it. So, but my context was the places that I worked, really. And my personal history with food, which is a family history, right? So. My grandmother used to host dinner parties. She kept a kosher household, but she was very up on like the latest food things, and she was kind of constantly trying to like make delicious and interesting food for groups of people in her house in Stockholm, where they lived in an apartment. And then my mum similarly like made fresh food and all of that. So I had these influences going into it. And then like when I started working. I worked in a restaurant in Manchester called Simply Heathcote's, which was kind of like quite
Where
a shit.
Where was that? Is that
off Deansgate, basically. So it's between Albert Square and there's like roads that go down to Deansgate.
How shit the food used to be in Manchester.
Oh, so shit.
It's now getting like a revival.
There's stuff happening there, for sure. But like it was a sort of, and then but really it happened when I went to London, because that place closed for refurbishment, and then they were going to reopen and like push for a Michelin star. So it was going to like become fine dining, and so I was like, oh fuck, I need to go and like work in some fine dining places. So I basically at that point started doing stages like and like some like the Manoir and like Texture I went to the Ledbury and the Vineyard, which was a 2 Michelin star place in Newbury. And so I did like Michelin stuff, and then I also at that point staged at Bread and Wine. And like when I did that at St. John Bread and Wine, I'm talking about, I was like immediately like, no, this is my shit. This is like exactly the kind of stuff that I like, right?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yes.
So like literally like I got there, and like at the time James Lowe was the head chef, obviously now Lyle's and Floor for a bit, and Lee Tin and Black Axe Mangal was the sous chef. So it's quite like a fucking all-star crew, right? Yeah. And my first job on my first day was like butchering pig's heads with Lee. I'd never seen a pig's head before, and he was like showing me how to take basically so that you can make a bath chat. It's like take the face off the skull that's what it is, right? So but we started doing that, and I was like, wow, this is fucking cool. This is like completely different to what I've experienced at the Manuel.
What was the feeling you were getting when you're ripping the skin off a pig, which you didn't get, which you weren't getting at the other places?
I think it was because I think there's a definite appeal to the manual aspect of being a chef, right?
Yeah.
And I think that like the directness, the contact with the ingredient is important to me, but also like being able to see a building block like that from the beginning onwards is exciting to me. Like, how are we going to make this into something? Sure. And being allowed at that inexperienced point to be a part of that was quite a privilege. Yeah.
And what was, so it was James Lowe and Lee, I can never say, I'm so
Tiernan.
bad. Tiernan, I'm so bad, but he's Black Axe Mangal, right? But what was, as you said, it's an all-star team. Why were those chefs, like, specifically, and so as I'm trying to get how they kind of imprinted on you?
Sorry, because I think, sorry, you're going to say...
Like, what I was going to say, like, what was you, those, as you said, all-star team, like, why were they all-stars as opposed to...
To me, well, I think because first of all, it was my first introduction to like very seasonal cookery, which I related to straight away because I was like, this just makes sense to me. Like, the fact is that you're using things that are at their best now. James at the time was very into like it was the beginning of like foraging becoming a thing. He was a kind of forager type guy, and I had done a lot of that with my dad because his first degree was botany. He'd had a PhD in botany.
Oh, really?
So like we did a lot of like flower picking, mushroom picking, and so on as children. And so it's just like, for me, it was just really weird that people in restaurants like to do it, because I was like, well, this is something we do at home.
We're going to have to talk about that. That's got my curiosity going.
Fine. Yeah. But like, anyway, so that was the seasonality. The butchery side of it, I immediately took to, and like also the kind of simplicity and austerity of the St. John aesthetic was something that like made a lot of sense to me, because it was like, really, what you're doing here is you're like distilling quality, and you're basically saying, oh well, I want this ingredient to be really good, and I don't really want to adorn it that much. I kind of just want to have, I want a cold mutton salad with bread and green sauce because I've got leftover roast mutton and I need a piquant dressing, and I'm going to use watercress because it's peppery as fuck and it grows in the UK, right? So it's like, I don't need to dress this up any more than that because it's perfect as it is. And that kind of thing, which started for me there, that is how I feel now. Right? And that's, so bringing it back to the Camberwell Arms and the confidence and all of that, it's like, that's why this place, in my opinion, is good, because it's not the best restaurant all the time, but there's this conviction, total conviction from me, that like simplicity is a good thing, and keeping things basic, maybe, but like quality oriented and undiluted, like allowing the intrinsic quality of something to shine through, is like how you make really delicious food.
Yeah, the undiluted thing is really interesting. I know this is, again, something which I picked up, but I think there's another reason the high ceilings in this place add a kind of, a bit like what I was saying to Osh about the bodyguards. Have you been to Devon? Have you seen?
Yes, I know what you mean, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, fuck, I was like, this is mad. Like, but there's little things like that I picked up on, but I was like, there's the kind of the oomph of rawness you get. I think the high ceilings here add huge gravitas to that kind of, it just looks at things and kind of shines a magnifying glass on kind of the brutal, beautiful simplicity of the whole thing.
Yeah.
But then how did you said that those gave you the kind of the if we're applying this back to David Bowie, like the only art I'll ever study is the art I can steal from, right? So that you're with Lee, you're at St. John, you're kind of picking up on that simplicity. And this is one thing I asked Margot, I was like, how did you make Rochelle different from St. John? Right. Because obviously she's her husband's first citizen, right? How did you then go and say, right, we want this to be similar to that, but it's going to be Mike and Camberwell Arms, it's going to be its own beast on its own, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So there's a middle step though, which is that, I went from St. John to the Anchor and Hope, like after some time, and I worked at the Anchor and Hope, and which is, Jonathan and Rob used to work at St. John, so when they opened the Anchor and Hope, which was like one of the earliest kind of proper gastropubs, and I use that only in the sense of like a literal sense, i.e. a pub with actually nice food,
sure.
rather than like your chrome tapped managed bullshit which you get from all homogenous brewery offerings basically. But they were seasonal, butchery focused, like really lovely ingredients and all of that, right? So the Anchor and Hope was a continuation of the St. John aesthetic. But for me, the pub setting was really appealing as well, because it was like, there are people drinking pints here, and there are people kind of enjoying their space in a different way to the kind of rarefied hall of a restaurant. You know, it seems more informal. I like that. You know, that's appealing to me. So that continues for quite a few years, because I worked there for 3-ish years, and the Canton for about the same, maybe slightly longer at both, I don't know. And then in terms of defining the Camberwell Arms, I mean, honestly, at that point, I was like, well, I just want to apply myself, all these principles of seasonality and simplicity, I want to take that, but I kind of also feel like there are other processes that I'm going to use. So at that point, it was really like, no, it's just going to be like the same, but I'm going to be slightly more detail focused. So that was literally it. So it's very simple. So like, I was like, okay, I'm going to brine my own bacon, and I'm going to smoke it in-house, for example, or I'll smoke my own. So we were doing brining and smoking, and we were doing curing of meats and stuff like that, which is something I'd started to do at the Canton. It's not something that happened at the Anchor. So these are like small things, and it's so absurd because I say these to you now knowing full well that that's not how you define something. But at that point in time, I was like, those are the kinds of things that will distinguish us. And I think my cookery is just ever so slightly different in a way that, like, I do get kind of fixated on things being... At that point, I definitely did, not so much now, but then I was interested in the idea of like doing the best version of something according to my own recollection of what something is. So what I mean by that is that in St. John and in the Credo of St. John, you would make a mayonnaise with extra virgin olive oil, right? Which I hate. Like, because to me, that is not mayonnaise. Like, when I think of mayonnaise, I'm thinking about Hellmann's mayonnaise. I'm thinking about white colour and sort of sweet and acidic and like fatty. But like when you make it with extra virgin olive oil, which is
Why would they do that?
But that's a traditional way of making mayonnaise. That's the original way of making mayonnaise,
is it?
with extra virgin olive oil. And so what you end up with is an emulsion that's like quite intensely bitter with the flavour of extra virgin olive oil. And it's like, this is so far removed from me for like what I think of as mayonnaise. And I love mayonnaise, like in a really shitty way. I love like processed shit mayonnaise. But then I was like, but if I like that, then when I start my own business, I should start making stuff that like emulates that in a way. So I would like, this is a small thing, but like my mayonnaise recipe started to use a neutral oil and a different type of mustard and a different type of vinegar and something like that. So that was an example of something where I was like, okay, well, my personal experience is like, that's what I enjoy. Some other things, like for example, we've got a rotisserie which we still use for chickens, because I used to love getting rotisserie chickens from the supermarket and like buying a baguette and a salad and just
and
like,
mayonnaise.
Right,
That's
exactly.
Life's greatest simple pleasures. That is.
Right, so exactly. So I was like, all right, so I want to put that on the menu, and we're going to leave it on the menu, and it's still on the menu. Every week you can get chicken and chips there with salad, which is the least sophisticated thing on the menu. But it's there for that reason, and because for me it's like immediately pleasurable when I think about it. But it's also something that's very accessible, like people can. So I think there was a few of these things coming together basically at that moment where I was sort of, I don't know, like I was open to the idea of like things being less restaurant-y and more kind of home style, but also quite like detail focused. So I would take that approach, but I would be a chef about it more than I would be now.
Oh my god, I am so excited. It feels like Hungary is finally swimming in the big leagues. I can't believe this, it's absolutely mental. But delighted to announce that Big Fish, yes, Big Fish, are partner of the podcast. Perry's been on the podcast 3 times. Listeners absolutely love it. Some of our most downloaded and cherished episodes of all time. But Big Fish are behind literally so many brands in your cupboard, in your weekly shop. Charlie Bigham, Year Valley, Tyrrell's, Clipper Tea, Goo, Rana. I mean, mate, the list is longer than the River Nile. But they also share risk and invest in brands that they really believe are a force for good. They're brands that they believe are going to be the next big thing, like Howder, the snack that gives back. But even more exciting news, Big Fish want to speak to the next wave of small challenger food and drink brands that are destined for big things, the racconteurs, the movers, shakers, buccaneering visionaries. So look, if you want to speak to Big Fish and just have a chat, get your brand in front of them, then drop me a message. My mate Louis from Local Beer, Amazing Beer, was in their office, aka La Fish Bowl, last week, chatting to Perry, Freddie and the Big Fish crew. So drop me a message if you would like to speak to them. Bohemi, our beloved sponsor, are helping build the fastest growing challenger food and drink brands. Look, if you're a small brand just starting out and need your first indie stockist, your first 100 stockists to wholesale, Bohemi are the platform to categorically speed that up. But if you're a big brand wanting to get bigger, Bohemi are also insane. They make field sales marble smooth, silky slick. They're just epic. Ollie's been on this podcast twice, actually. They saw a 29% uplift in sales when using Bohemi to check major malt listings availability. Insane. 29% uplift by downloading an app. Insane. Lucky Saint, my boy Aaron Duff, who's coming on this podcast in a couple of weeks, he uses it to manage a team of 30 people, and Lucky Saint have unlocked 500 draft listings by using Bohemi. Look, you've got to get involved with this stuff. It's absolutely insane, and it will categorically change your life. It's just the sickest platform. I use it all the time at Islands.
That definitely links to the book, like the people, like cooking for people, like those kind of abilities to, as you say, that right kind of level of chefiness.
Exactly.
But with the warmth of going, like one of life's greatest pleasures is a rotisserie chicken, fucking hot sauce, mayo, bang that in. So good. This may sound like a really stupid question, but I think some of the best questions are stupid. But like, how important is being in Camberwell to this place? So I know we talked about at the beginning the Scotch. The pork fat and Scotch bonnet on toast, and I think you were saying like everywhere you go down here, like there's some sort of there's
a prevalence of Scotch bonnets.
Prevalence of Scotch bonnets, so,
right?
But I think some places can't. So for example, say we were to open your pub, let's call it X pub in like Chelsea, for example,
right.
Or somewhere like, or even like say Islington.
Yeah.
Like how are you kind of putting your tentacles into this area as a place and bringing it into the pub? Do you know what I mean?
Sorry, I'm just laughing at the use of the word tentacles, but I'm into it.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting question because I'm an interloper here. I didn't grow up in Camberwell, but I think that I had already opened Frank's. In 2008. And so like I'd started working in Peckham then and living in Peckham and kind of being around in the area. And Camberwell for me felt like, I don't know, there's an interesting, like a lot of London, there's like quite a diverse array of people and classes readily on show. So for example, like if you go behind the Camberwell Arms, you'll get into like big estates. But if you go across the street, you're on Camberwell Grove, which is like probably one of the fanciest Georgian streets in London.
Yeah.
Right. And this is like a lot of London, right? Partially it's to do with the bombing in the Second World War, and partially it's to do with the natural growth of the city.
Wait. So what about the Second World War bombings?
Well, because I think like patches of London were blown out, weren't they? They were
and then
destroyed.
that's where they put the estates in.
Right. So they put new builds there.
Yeah, because that's a real interesting. Like say in Ireland, you've got the North and South divide.
Right.
In Dublin, sorry, where it's like literally, I don't know which. I think the South's rich, but like there's a quite clear fucking divide.
Right.
I was doing some work over there for a brand. Like you literally walk over this bridge, and like the accent's different.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas like in London, why it's unique is it's all smattered into one.
Yeah, it's like loads of towns that have grown into one another, right?
Yes.
And so London as a whole is a 2,000-year-old metropolis, okay? It's been trading and living and breathing for a very long time, surrounding the river, the portal of trade and so on, right? But in terms of like how we talk about London, we talk about where things are from, like Camberwell, Peckham, New Cross, right? And they're all different towns, along this street, along the A2 going out to Dover. But like they are just like, I mean, it's geographically, we're talking about like 5-10 minutes, further along. And so there isn't necessarily like very clear identities, but often there is kind of slightly separate feeling that you can kind of pick up on.
Yeah, because it's like the palpable, like obvious example is somewhere like the obvious would be, because it's just such a juxtaposition, would be like Chelsea versus Camberwell. Do you know what I mean? Like, but there's just...
that is like a clear, like there's a wealth difference there for sure.
Yeah.
But like, and that creates a different vibe. But like, I think also Camberwell for me feels like it, and has always felt like this, that it has like a very clear sense of identity. And so like whether or not I was feeding into that directly by like pulling things from the identity of Camberwell, or whether it was resonating with me and felt like something that I had to pay heed to, that's maybe more realistic. Because the fact is, if I was going to be a neighbourhood operator here, I had to like fit into Camberwell. And I don't know that at the beginning, I don't know that I aimed for that in any other way than kind of bringing part of my own authenticity to it, which I've kind of already touched on. Yeah. And I think that was my armour in a way. That was my my strategy was like, well, if I just try hard to make delicious food in this spot, eventually I'll be part of I'll be accepted.
Yeah, and also I think Osh talked about that. He said, like, same person, but he talked about the difference between Mayfair and Soho. He said they're like two different countries.
Yeah.
And how he'd kind of oozed and grooved his kind of what he was wearing and stuff had changed. Yeah. And I think that is, you can still be your authentic self, but kind of ply or mould into the area. Let's talk about Franks. I read somewhere that you said like you were a precocious twat, which I love that, because so bold. You've left uni. Not sacked off, but like decided to park biology and go into food. I think were you 20 or 25?
20.
That is mad. Yeah. Like talk to me about the genesis of Frank's. It got Europe's best bar, didn't it, last year? Which is sick.
Also, I mean, it's stupid, isn't it?
It's open more days now.
It's open Wednesday to Sunday, 11 till 11. Yeah.
Okay. So then talk to me about the genesis of Frank's.
Right.
And then I think I read somewhere that, you hadn't even didn't know what tax was and stuff like that.
Sure, but I can't talk about that anymore, because the last time I talked about that, I got in trouble for talking about it. So we won't talk about that. But I can allude to it. So yeah. So
I suppose my question is why was being a precocious twat a superpower?
That's funny. I mean, I think because I was more confident than I deserved to be, and probably a bit entitled because of a relatively privileged upbringing, which is something that is not a good characteristic that I've tried hard to move away from, but at the time was useful to me in terms of believing that I could do something, which I definitely didn't know how to do, but I was willing to kind of blag it in a way, trying to just we're gonna do it. We're gonna see what happens. And that approach is completely insane. It's suicide if you're unless you're willing to put the hours in and you've got enough conviction at the time to carry it off. And I did, I think, at the time. And I also put the fucking hours in. I mean, like I said, I was working every single day from morning till night.
But how did you get people to what was the vision when you
So just to be clear about this, so Frank's, it's not like the overall idea doesn't come from me, right? But I mean, I'm a partner in it from the beginning, but I was focused on the food, and Frank and I built the bar together, but the spec and the idea came from our other partners. So at the time, Hannah Barry, who owns the Hannah Barry Gallery in Peckham and is a very important figure in art in London now, and is our landlord at Frank's still, she had a sculpture exhibition on the roof of the car park in Peckham, which had pre-existed. So it was there, I think, for at least 1, maybe 2 years ahead of Frank's. And then she met Frank or knew Frank and was asking Frank about. Frank was also working at the Anchor and Hope with me at that time, and sometimes working for his dad in his deli in Vauxhall. And
what's the deli?
Italo.
I know. I used to work in Vauxhall. So
oh, nice. Yeah. So Charlie Boxer, that's his deli. That's Frank's dad, basically.
Sweet.
Right. So anyway, they were Hannah was oh well, we want a museum cafe, right? That was the idea. So as in, what I'm talking about. If you go to the Tate or something like that, and there is a refectory style cafe where you're getting probably quite shit food, and it's usually operated by some huge corporation Compass or something like that, which is some a global catering company that has an offering that fits into that can be managed from a distance.
And rinse and repeat sort of job.
Right. Exactly. So but Hannah was no, I don't want that, but I want that, but I want it done properly, right? So the idea was refreshments for people visiting the sculpture exhibition. And Frank at the time, was working at the Anchor, but kind of was interested in the idea of we wanted sponsorship from Campari for one. So we wanted to get a sponsorship. We wanted to get sponsorship.
That's so bold. That's what I'm trying to get. It's that is so fucking bold at that age. But I suppose that's the power of the age, right?
Also we worked, so because the Anchor is St. John adjacent, the Negroni, for example, was part of the zeitgeist in that place of work, as was Fernet Branca, right? And those things, I think...
Is that the Anchor and Hope linked to St. John?
Well, so as in, Jonathan and Rob worked at St. John for years. Jonathan was the head chef of St. John for quite a few years.
Right.
Right, okay, so they're not partners there, but yes, they,
I'm with you. Okay.
Yeah, because that's why earlier when when I was talking about the extension of, it is like that. It's like a pub version of St. John, right?
Yeah.
That's what it was at that time anyway. So like the kind of like Negronis, for example, like now obviously completely ubiquitous, but like it sort of felt like at the time that it was something that we enjoyed that wasn't that cool, I guess, or known about. And so and Frank, I think, was interested. You'd have to talk to him about this, but I feel like he liked the idea of like Riviera style chic. And so like his drinks offering was kind of along those lines. And then the space, the like building was designed by Paloma Gormley and Lettice Drake, two fledgling architects in training at that point. They were slightly older than me, but only by like, I would say like, I don't know exactly how old they were, but maybe like 21, 22.
As in that they would just...
In training, literally.
Right.
So they weren't fully, qualified or anything like that. Far from it.
Yeah.
But they designed this mad structure that was built out of scaffolds that could be like put up like a tent and then disassembled at the end of the year. So like that added to it. And then Frank's drinks offering, and then my food offering, which was basically a product of what I could do, that I knew that I could make, that would fit into a St. John sort of aesthetic, because I was very influenced by that, but like work around a barbecue. So like we had sardines coming off the barbecue, and I had like grilled corn with smoked paprika and butter, and I had like lamb leg that was just barbecued and served sliced as it was, tomatoes and sea salt. I mean, it was really basic, like in the first year, but that kind of stripped back aesthetic kind of fitted in with the slightly arty kind of part to it as well, you know?
Yeah, it's like the hodgepodge of like all those different people you've...
Yeah.
That's what I feel like when I... my mate lives in Peckham. When I come through here, is it feels like there's the hodgepodge is the word, like lots of different things melting in together.
Yeah.
And the kind of the summation of that is with Frank's, of like you've got, you yourself, Frank, this
the architect,
the two younger architects, mix it all together, and like that can create kind of constraint breeds. Constraint breeds.
It was constraint, like
Yeah.
certainly, because I think also it was like, what can we actually do that we know that we can do? So that's constraint, because it's like we only have a certain amount of knowledge and experience at this point, right? So how can I actually pull this off? I have to make something that... So I didn't have any chefs working for me. Everyone in my kitchen was an art student on summer holidays. So there was no like chef. I was the only chef, and I'd only been a chef for like a year, right? Working in kitchens. So, whether you would call me a chef at that point, I don't know. I don't know if I would have called myself a chef. I mean, in some ways, yeah, but like direction-wise, yes. Experience-wise, no.
But so I know we kind of, none of this goes in any sort of chronological order, but we talked about like the kind of the redefining yourself when you had the breakdown, and I think ultimately there's levels. There is a point in time where you do need to focus on the work prism. If you're trying to get somewhere, like if you want to be a hippie dippy and like live in a camper van, maybe not. But like if you're trying to get somewhere, you need that. You need to fucking look for that work prism for a period of time. You're 20, you've left uni, you've had a bit of experience. What are you like? You're working at the Anchor and Hope. You're like working basically double shifts, doing the Saturday, Sunday,
Friday,
yeah. Like, what are you saying to yourself at that? What's the vision in your head when you're like?
No vision, just work. That's it.
No vision.
No, just like, this is a good idea, keep doing it. That was it. Now, when I think about it, it's so mental, because like, someone once told me that you shouldn't go into a business without knowing how to get out of it. Yeah. And like, they told me that like in the last sort of 2 or 3 years, right? And I was like, that makes loads of sense. But like, I didn't think about any of that stuff. We didn't have a company, and we didn't, the way that it was organized was, I mean, it was like spit and sawdust, man. There was nothing holding it together apart from like the will of like 6 people who thought it was a good idea.
That is the genius of it.
Yeah, right.
That is so fucking genius. It's like, I know retrospectively, like retrospects, you can post-rationalise things, but I think retrospects, you can be like, that was meant to work. But there is something about, I think a lot of people say kind of like pirates as like a food and drink startup, whether it's a restaurant or like a brand. Like there's this mentality of like just 6 people really believing in something.
Yeah.
It's like you can't. Like, I think grit and determination will trump any level of intelligence to a point.
And like Frank's is a really good example of that, because like certainly from my perspective, I did not know how to do that job. Like on paper, if you had described it to someone, they would have been like, well, no, like I'm not hiring him to be the head chef of a new rooftop bar in Peckham and giving him a creative remit. Like he's been a chef for a year. He's an idiot. Like he's just a precocious knobhead, right? And like I think that the whole of Frank's is like that. Like if you explain what it is to a bank manager at the beginning, they're like laughing you out of the bank. You know, it doesn't make any sense. But like from a business perspective, over the years, you know, it's been a great business. It's been super busy at times, and it like to like, yeah, I think I've told this story before, but like the original business plan was very simple. You know, Frank wrote something that along the lines of like, if 30 people come on the weekend, you know, we'll break even. And only one person kind of said, but what are you going to do if you're busy? And I think it was just like, well, we're not going to be busy because we're in a car park in Peckham and like you have to get a lift that stinks of piss and like there's crackheads everywhere and stuff like that. It's like no one is going to come to this. And like the first weekend there was a heat wave and we had like 200 or 300 people there on the first day, and it was like, whoa, this is crazy. And now the capacity's 1,000, you know, which is mental, and there's a queue on a hot day. So, but that comes from that original authenticity, what you've described as like grit, but like this thing of having 6 people who like are out of their depth, but like really believe in something, just pushing towards making it work. And that's, to me, when I go to Frank's now, I still feel that. Like to me, it still feels like that. And that's because there is this kind of authentic thing. You couldn't create Frank's artificially. You can't just pick up bits of it, bottle it and take it somewhere else. It's not Frank's then, it's something else. And there are so many rooftop bars in London and so many of them are just homogenous bullshit, you know?
Yeah, it's so interesting. It's almost like that is all we started the question of like how important is Camberwell in the Camberwell Arms or Peckham? I know they're both kind of, they're not the same, but they're similar. But also, I suppose Frank's is the kind of the darling example of that in terms of like the hodgepodge of different people working together. And as you say, you can't put it in you can't read Frank's in a business book. So that, like as in. At the time, you wouldn't be like, okay, that's going to work. It's a car park, as you said, fucking crackheads on smack everywhere, like stinks of piss, but like you can make it work. A few more things and then we'll wrap this up, mate. But would love to go back to your old man and this botanist, how to say it?
Botany.
Botany.
Right.
That seems really interesting and kind of sparks my curiosity. Like, talk to me about that and what were you picking and... Yeah, because obviously now foraging is now like so... Like not even in vogue. Like I think it's not. It's like,
maybe we're in a post-foraging era.
Yeah, like it's weird. Like I interviewed Tommy Banks up in Yorkshire. And he's got a guy who's like full time as a forager. Yeah. So they can get access to all these weird ingredients. And I'm like, then he showed me like his labs. Like not labs, so they're basically. Yeah, labs makes it sound like it's some NASA shit. It's not that. It's like a shed basically.
Yeah.
Like that. But. Like all these crazy fucking ingredients that I've just never seen before. I was like, and they're doing all sorts of weird things to it. But I'd love to kind of go back to way before that with your old man. Like, how was he?
Well, so like mushrooms are the best example. Like because we just used to. I mean, it was a thing, like autumn came around and we'd be out in the woods picking mushrooms, and he had his spots because, you know, with mushrooms, when you like cut them rather than pick them, they regrow in the same spot every year. So, you know, if you've got your spot where like something is growing, like there used to be this beech tree that had fallen. I think they have to be on the ground for like 3 to 5 years before they'll start producing mushrooms. But we used to go and pick these oyster mushrooms in the same spot, like pretty much like clockwork, like every year.
Where is this?
On Wimbledon Common. So like I grew up in Wimbledon, and so we'd go on Wimbledon Common and pick these oyster mushrooms. But then also like we would be wandering around, and constantly he would be like going off path and like looking for penny buns. It's like, you know, ceps, but also chanterelles and girolles and various other things like this. And we were, and also we would talk about mushrooms that you can't eat and so on. So we would like have this kind of ongoing narrative of like species in the woods that you'd be discussing whilst you were walking, because that was what he was fascinated by.
Yeah, that's mad. And also I think there's definitely something in there about kind of having the path and going off the path. If you were to like, let's link your dad to your book and then we can wrap this up, but like, so cooking for people, like if you're to cook something for your dad tonight from that book, like what do you think you'd go with out of all those wonderful
it's it's a good question. I mean, there is a menu in the book where I talk a bit about him teaching me to fish, and I think the recipe is like a crab salad basically with soda bread, and I'll probably make that. So it's essentially like it's like there's potatoes, white and brown crab meat, mayonnaise, lots of herbs and lettuce, and that's the salad. And then it's served with soda bread, which is like spread very thickly with butter. Like my dad used to have a lot of butter, sort of teeth mark level thickness. So yeah, probably something like that, I think was what I would say. Because he loved crab. You know what's interesting about my dad though is that he was in the Air Force, and when he was like 20, because he was alive when conscription was still a thing. So this was post Second World War, but he did his military service. Yeah. And he went running at night, and he hit a barrier at the front of the base because the lights weren't on, and he fell backwards and cracked his skull. And actually he had quite a poor sense of smell, and therefore quite a poor sense of taste. Really? And so but he loved giving feedback about food, and we all just accepted the fact that we knew that he couldn't really taste or smell things, but he would always want his fucking 2 pence. But yeah, so something because crab's quite sweet, and it has a relatively strong and intrinsically its flavor is very well defined as crab. So that's something that he would have been able to pick up on, and the textures of a salad like that would have been enjoyable to him. So yeah. Do
you think the palate can be how scientific do you think that is, or is it something you just train, or is it?
Do you know what? I don't know. I feel because I only have my own experience palate-wise, so I don't know what your palate's like, and I don't know what anyone else's is like. So for me, I know that I've got a very sensitive sense of smell in terms of smell is really important to me, and if something smells good, it's probably going to taste good. And I think beyond that, because I'm very interested in it, because I think the idea of people enjoying flavors in a different way, I think there is science to it, in as much as there are certain genetic combinations that lead people to taste in a specific way. For example, coriander is a great example where there are a certain set of people that have a gene that makes coriander taste like soap. Whereas for other people, it's this kind of fragrant herb. And similarly, I think bitterness, there are people that can taste bitterness and people that can't genetically. And so what is it like to be on the other side of that? If you can't taste bitterness, how do bitter things taste?
I think it links back to what we were saying each. So we could create, say, 15 of those pork neck things go out. Because of each palate, that creates the unique moment of magic.
Right.
One thing I realised I wanted to ask you about, and it could be delicate, so tell me to fuck off if you need to. But I remember you saying that there was quite a lot of partners involved at some of the early stages. And I think people listening to this have partners, and it can go I don't know what you specifically said, but it can go quite pear-shaped, to say the least. What's your relationship been like with partners over the years? And was there any how's that worked?
Well, so I am a partner and owner in 2 businesses, and in both of those businesses I've been involved in buying out the original partners with new partners. So that's a kind of unique position in a way, because not everybody would go through a buyout in their lifetime, whereas I've done 2.
Wait, so how does that actually work? So you basically we want to keep this.
Yeah. So
well, I'm going to go and find 2 other people to get the money.
Kind of. Yeah. So I think basically the mechanic is or the mechanism is a share purchase and sale. So there's money involved and so on with that. And there's a lot of kind of legal aspect to it. But the big thing about it is that there's a distinct emotional involvement at this level of business, and especially for someone like me. So it was quite tricky both times. Some of my most intense business experience has been during those moments where we were going through a buyout, because it really feels like a sort of super emotional relationship breakup, where you're kind of separating from someone that there's been good parts of the relationship with, but that in the main it's wrong and you have to stop it.
What did you know was wrong? What was the calling to say, fuck it, I need to take this into my own hands?
So I think like with Frank's, I think it was the fact that Frank and I felt like as the operators, the hospitality operators, like we should be allowed to like operate in a way that was like practical. And I think that at that moment, it felt like the original 6 people were kind of not aligned in like their goal for what the space should be. And so it kind of came to a head where it felt like Frank and I wanted to continue running it. And because we were doing the day-to-day, it felt like we could move for that. And we ended up in a sort of emotional but not totally acrimonious split. And we ended up bringing another partner in.
Are you looking to turbocharge your brand, take it to another level, save money, save energy, save stress, save time? Well, I've got the perfect thing for you. I am delighted to announce that HC Brands, formerly HC Consulting, my boy Harry Clark, has just launched a commercial growth accelerator program designed specifically for challenger food and drink brands. You can upskill your commercial team. They've got so many modules. You can handpick them where you can do the full shebang. You're going to save hours of research. You're going to get the tools to turbocharge your growth, get better clarity on your brand's objectives and directions. And look, Harry's worked with some amazing brands, Holy Moly, Islands, Savile, and Rooted Drinks. He's really helped me with a strategy for Hungary. Yeah, if you're looking to turbocharge your brand, link in the show notes, and you're going to be able to do that easy peasy, lemon squeezy.
But I suppose for other people, it's like, is there anything you could speak to about how to navigate those really like tumultuous, as you say, sometimes acrimonious kind of business? As you say, it's a fucking breakup, really and truly.
I don't know if I'm the best person to ask, man, because I took it pretty hard. I mean, like the breakup here was really difficult. Like, so I think the Camberwell Arms, so my original partners, there were 4 others, and I felt unsupported by them in a way that I was used to being supported by Frank, specifically at Frank's. And so I think to them, they weren't expecting to give me the level of support that I was expecting, and that created an issue. And so when they came to me and suggested that, maybe you'd be happier if we didn't work here, I was like, yeah, actually that's something I've been thinking about the whole time. And so it felt like really right. But then through the process, they were a lot older than us, and I think a lot more savvy. And what ended up happening was James and Frank, my partners from Frank, and I, used money from Frank's to buy this business. And I think at the time,
Camberwell.
At the time overpaid for it. But because we didn't really know what we were doing, I felt afterwards like the other guys took advantage of me a little bit because I was so involved in it and I was so young, and I expected them to be nicer about it. But the reality is that they just.
How old are you at this point?
So it was in 2016. So I was 27. Yeah. And that was my second buyout because Frank's had happened before that. So, so it was really difficult because also these guys were my mentors. I'd worked in their restaurants and worked with them. Yeah. And so I felt let down by them, but also they were just doing something. They were just being business guys about it. And I was being an emotional young person attached to a business. And that's really difficult. So I think the best advice I could give is remembering that business is business and life is separate. Mm-hmm. And so although your emotions are intrinsically attached sometimes to things that you're close to, the reality is that business is just going to happen around you, and the structures of business exist for a reason, which is kind of to make these sorts of things unemotional,
Yeah, I think one of the key kind of things to bubble out of today is the kind of the 2 prisms, the personal prism and the business prism. I think when you're young, the two are, and I think that's a good thing. Yeah. You need that fucking, right, I'm going to find my identity. Yeah. I interviewed a guy who wrote a book called The Status Game, fucking interesting guy. And he goes, you get what you derive identity from status. So go and do the thing that's going to give you the status to a point, but then obviously you need to kind of backtrack on that. But then how you can separate those two. So just the final thing is, I think one thing we haven't really touched upon is how you've been, and this has been going for 10 years, which in today's climate is just that's mad. Yeah. That's such a fucking achievement.
Thank
Especially
you.
When you've got, as we've detailed today, you've got Franks, you've had a mental breakdown, you've had a kid, you've lost your old man, all sorts. What is those 10 years have been tumultuous. What are you trying to take into, say, the next 10, 20 years? So this becomes like a St. John, if we want to really link it all together.
I mean, I think that St. John has a brilliant clarity of aesthetic, and that's what makes it appealing. It's that and the consistency. So I think, and I don't actually necessarily mean the consistency of the quality, and that's not meant as a dig, but what I mean is the consistency of the aesthetic, right? It's like they have stuck to their guns. It's like that's how they operate, and that's what's appealing to a lot of people around the world, right? The Camberwell Arms will never achieve that kind of like global status, but what it can do is it can be considered as somewhere that will be consistently good, where you will have a good time. And I think knowing that that's something that I know how to do makes me feel confident about the next 10 years, because I don't need to struggle to get to that point anymore because I'm already there. So I think like being confident about that makes my life so much easier, because up till this point it was a struggle to get to that point.
So you're now confident that you kind of know how to keep this being as good as it is?
Well, I know what I know, and I know that I'm doing it now, and I know that I like what it is now. And those things all together make me feel confident about continuing to do that into the future. And I think the other thing is like being less driven by growth. I for years wanted to open loads of sites and do loads of new shit, which is like the perennial thing for people in London. But the reality is that I don't think I would care if I'd never opened something else.
That's another fucking interesting point, because there's a kind of maniacal obsession with growth. Didn't you try and do a pizza place?
Yes, we did. Yeah, we
what
opened.
happened with that? Like,
it was great, but it just didn't work. We opened it.
Was that when you were like in the growth mindset?
Yeah, definitely. Well, so actually that was post breakdown.
But you said you'd taken a load of antidepressants.
I was taking a really high dose of antidepressants, and I was like really overly optimistic about everything in a kind of unreasonable way.
Fucking bouncy castle. Like, what does that feel like?
It just feels like everything's fine all the time. And like you need that if you're really depressed, suicidal, anxious. You know, you need to start to stabilize in that way, right? But like then when you're not that, it's like, well, life isn't like that. You know, there's ups and downs, man. Like you've got to be able to like tolerate the flex, you know? So, and that's like curing depression. It's like how you
tolerating the flex.
Yeah.
I love that's such a great way of putting it.
Yeah. You know, because it's okay to be stressed, but like just how much stress and so on, right? So anyway,
also suffering as well. Like there's stress and there's suffring. That's
right.
They're two separate things, but I think people think they're the same thing.
Yeah, right. So anyway, where are we? We're talking about Mike's. So Mike's was a pizza shop, and it was a really great idea to do something, which is interesting because now pizza's having this massive resurgence in London, where there's like lots of different styles of pizza and like blah, blah, blah. And actually at the time it was a very much like sourdough dictated, like it was all kind of Franco Manca influenced, like Neapolitan style pizza. It has to be authentic, and like we actually wanted to make Roman style pizza, square pizzas cooked in a tray, very light and crispy, lots of toppings, very different. But the thing is, I'm not a pizza chef, and as an idea it was great, but it wasn't really, I don't think it really was thought through in the same way that we had thought through this, for example. And I think like I was less tolerant of the idea of carrying on through the hardship, because the Camberwell Arms certainly went through loss-making periods and hasn't been like the most profitable business ever, like for a long swathe of its existence. And it isn't that it's super profitable now, but it's like certainly it's a reasonable business. But like I think with Mike's, it was just an example of like imagining that you can just apply your skill set to a different problem, and like that it can work. And like we smashed it. We opened, we got a fucking like 9 out of 10 review in the Guardian. Like in week 1, we won the national best pizza at the National Pizza Awards.
Sick.
We smashed it, right? But what actually happened was that we had big staffing issues that were like partly to do with the like cultural aspects of like employing pizza chefs, and partly to do with...
What do you mean the cultural aspect?
Well, like the first guy that we hired was a bit older, and culturally, I think the reason that he left, so basically he left after sort of a few months, right? And he was like a core aspect of it, because I didn't have any understanding of like the pizza dough itself, which is the critical thing. So I needed this person, and that kind of dependency is not the way to operate a restaurant, right?
Right.
For me anyway.
Oh, because if
they leave, you're fucked. right?
With you, yeah, of course. Yeah,
So like,
yeah.
and the staff you've got know what they know from learning from that person, but like, unless they, you know, they're not the same as that person that has that knowledge, which is what I am here. Do you know what I mean? So
okay, so yeah.
So, but he was making really inappropriate comments, like some kind of racially inappropriate, some kind of sexually inappropriate, and I was informed of this and decided to do something about it, talk to him about it, and was like, you know, we need to remedy this. You can't be talking like that, / you need to apologize for the things that you've said. And in the phone call, he was like, yeah, okay, fine. And then that night he sent me a really long, aggressive email that was like, fuck you, I'm not doing what you say, you're an idiot, blah, 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 and I'm not coming to work, you know, from tomorrow. And I was like, oh, fuck, this is mental. The stress level's just fucking skyrocketing. And we went through this period of instability where the product suffered, and like we started to get less busy, and then we hired someone else who was really good, but then by the time that happened, the COVID staffing situation was happening, and as people were leaving, we couldn't rehire people, to the point where we had 2 people in the team, a full-time restaurant with 2 chefs, and we couldn't hire anyone else. And we were losing money, and I just kind of got to the point where I was just like, please make it stop. And I was so relieved when we did. But yeah, that was an example of like feeling like it's not that growth is inherently bad, it's just not necessary always.
Well, and also there's other ways to grow in terms of like not necessarily it's getting more people to this one site, or like
exactly,
or doing more events in this
exactly
room.
And that's exactly
there's other ways,
or writing a book, you know. These are all things
that
are like new aspects of professional life.
Yeah.
Or in other ways, having a baby, spending more time at home, you know, enjoying my actual life, you know. That's growth as well.
What, like with in terms of the stress, like I feel like now you've got these things in place where it's like bubbling up and you can like release the tap. And it just, what are some of those things you put in place now that, like, say mateys being really abusive in your pizza joint, like instead of going kind of a cataclysmic nightmare in your head, like how do you kind of open the valve?
Well, I think so. There's like a bigger structure which is kind of more to do with like exercising regularly, bit of deadlifting, you know, to bring it back to that. But like, so I'd say like regular exercise is really important for me. I still take antidepressants, although a different one to that point. I went cold turkey, which by the way was a terrible thing to do on a specific kind of antidepressant.
You're not meant to do that.
No, you're not. And the withdrawal was like awful and really extensive because there's a bounce back period.
Oh, really? Okay, interesting. I didn't know that. Yeah.
So, but then I do still take an antidepressant. I take a very low dose of like a really commonly available antidepressant, which is for me is like almost a placebo in as far as it's stabilizing but helpful. So there's those kinds of, and I do therapy once a week as well, and these are like ongoing. So these are like ongoing structural things that I've built into my life that help me to try and keep an even keel and help me to compartmentalize things, right? But I think the other thing is just like and this was a realization that came post breakdown, but something that I certainly live by, which is that, you know, these things just aren't that important. Like the fact is that those major stresses at work, like if you've lost a parent or you've had a child, like that's perspective, right? Because at that point you're like, okay, what's important to me? Because actually work doesn't come that high up on that. And this is from a serial work guy who loves his businesses and so on and so on. And like that allows me to be like, to float across difficulty in a way that I never used to be. I'm not saying I don't get stressed and I don't get, you know, really involved in stuff that I don't need to anymore, but in general, that kind of perspective has been super helpful for me in trying to like keep separate from the small stuff.
Well, that's it, and I think it's a perfect place to end. But like what you said, 2 things: handle the flex, and then also float over difficulty. And I think the 2 prisms of like, so many people listening to this are listening to this to get their business prism better. Yeah. And what I've taken, this is kind of, I feel like I'm in the fucking therapy chair, mate, so appreciate you helping me with this. But it's actually like, well, when are you going to turn around and focus on that? Because that's, if you, as you said, if you're not feeling good, how can that feel good?
Yeah, if you can't look after yourself, how can you look after someone else?
Mike, thank you so much, mate. I fucking love that. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Wicked.